How's your day been so far? How's your event been so far? Good, all right. Tons of information to take in. It's big, right? It's very, very big. Well, thank you very much for coming along to this particular session. I'm always delighted to see people coming along. The Smart Campus, is this a future for our universities? Now, I'm from a university environment. Our speakers are largely rooted in a university environment themselves as well. But I will say that this is relevant for both further education and sixth form as well. So the principles should be largely the same. Also, the focus is largely, from my perspective, on education. But some of the topics that we talk about would also be relevant for a research environment, or also even for estate management practices as well. But I'm coming at this from a learning perspective. We have a panel of expert speakers here. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves a little bit later, and we've got one change to the lineup as well. I see a little wave at the end. If any of you were in the Bett arena earlier on, you may recognize one of our speakers from there. And this session, perhaps unlike some of the ones that you might have been to today, is intended as a conversation. Now, our host encouraged you all to come together in the center a little bit. We're going to be asking for input from you today. These guys are going to be talking a little bit about their perspectives on the idea of the Smart Campus, but we'll also be looking for your input on it. We'll be looking for what intrigues or excites you about the ideas that come up today? What concerns you or terrifies you even about some of the ideas that are suggested? We'll be asking for that via Glisser as well. I haven't always been able to get it working myself, so if you struggle, then put your hand up and there'll be microphones around. There's various different ways as well. Stupidly, I'm probably going to try and field some questions via Twitter as well. You can see, if James, could you pop your head down slightly? Here's my Twitter handle. You can probably go that as well. So let's go for the first poll, please. So I think this is going to, here we go. So, question. What is a smart campus? You've all come here. Hopefully that phrase means something enough to encourage you to get in the room. What does it mean? Can you choose the statement that best represents your response to this statement? Number one, I'm advising on how to make our campus smarter. Number two, I've started working in this area. Now, hopefully some of you have used Glisser today already, so I might get a few responses here. There we go, lovely. We've got one response in already. So somebody here is already advising on how to make our campus smarter. Did that come in from our panel? Is anybody else getting that working? Let's see if we get any more. Take a moment or two. It's always dangerous trying to work with technology. I say that as a technologist as well. The other responses as well, this is a sort of sliding scale here. So from, I know what this thing in the future is all about, to what's it about? Am I in the right place? Okay, so here we go. I've got another response in. I've heard of it and I'm curious to find out more. So, lovely, it's starting to come in now. Okay, here we go. Okay, gentlemen, this tells us where we pitch our talks at today. This is the level of experience in our audience today. About a third of you are already working in this particular area, which is good. Around about half of you are rather more curious about what this is about. But luckily, last one, you're all in the right place. That's the most encouraging thing. So So before I hand over to our speakers, let me tell you a little bit about myself here. So at City, University of London, my main area of work is in the area of learning spaces. And essentially what that means us doing in a higher educational environment is looking at how we can enhance the physical classroom environment. And the main reason for that is to develop conditions that will enable and encourage enhancements for teaching and learning. This is the educational perspective that I said I was going to be coming to then. So there's a few examples, as you can see here, that we've been working on at City. It might include things like the kind of furniture that we use, the layout. We've got sort of sofa-style seating in a lecture theatre. We've got swivel seating, so you can quite easily break a theatre up and put some group work in it. And you've also got things like sort of distributed power across the rooms, so it facilitates the use of mobile devices more easily. The other thing City is about to start doing is to pilot certain aspects of Jisc's learning analytics project as well. We're in the very, very early stages of that. But if that's something that we move ahead with, that means that our educational offer will then also have a data layer on top of the physical classroom that we're looking at. So you may find in your own spaces that there are certain things that you recognize here. Our institutions have a proliferation of digital displays. Mobile learning, in some cases, is encouraged. General forms of educational technology, such as virtual learning environments or audience response systems, are already quite common. Then we look beyond that to the broader technical landscape. We pull in ideas such as the Internet of Things. We look at distributed sensors, artificial intelligence, robotics, even smart cities and renewable energy ideas. So what happens when these existing practices and the growing trends converge across the broader operating environment, such as a university campus? And does this therefore lead to what we might come to understand as a smart campus? Now, when I mentioned this idea to my boss, she said, you should make it a fireside chat. Now, if this was a responsive screen, I'd press this and we'd have a nice fire going, but you might just have to imagine the crackling of logs and the moving of flames, the flickering of flames. For some, this vision of a smart campus is an almost utopian environment where the walls are responsive and is an improved teaching and learning experience for all. For others, it's a dystopian nightmare of permanent surveillance or hack my lecture theatre security concerns. I'm saying, if my podium doesn't break, that if this is the future that we are heading towards, and as Stephen mentioned earlier, I'm not necessarily a techno-determinist either, but if these are the broader trends that are happening in our physical environments, now is the time to ask questions of that idea. Now is the time to try to shape the direction that these ideas moving. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this panel together. So, that's enough from me. We have three speakers here, and I'm going to ask them to... we have James Clay from Jisc. We have Professor Chris Pearce from the University of Glasgow, and Professor Stephen Heppell from himself, I believe. Good, thank you. So I'm going to give them about 5 minutes to talk about what they're working on in this particular area. Once we've done that, we'll turn over to you. What do you like about what you hear? What do you not like about it? That's enough from me. I'd like to pass over next to James.
Cheers, thank you. So, at Jisc, we're not just interested in the smart campus, we're also interested in the intelligent campus. So what does that mean? Well, already we have technologies that exist that do things quite clever. I mean, for example, I don't know about you, but my phone, it's very clever. I mean, today it said, I know where you parked. It's like, what? I know where you parked your car. And it's like, what? How do you know that? I've not told you that. I've not told you I've parked. I also know where you live. So immediately my phone is doing so much more. What you don't know is since you've been here at Bett, we've been tracking every single one of you through your mobile phone if you've been joining the free Wi-Fi. Or even if you haven't, because we can track every single wireless device. The other thing that we've been doing, or can do, is not just about facial recognition, so we know who is here, so we're taking photographs of you, we find out who you are, correspond it, we know how you've moved around, but also we're doing emotional recognition. We can actually find out how you're feeling about this session. There are some people who I can see are really engaged and really happy, and other people who are like a little bit distracted, a little bit bored, checking their email and so on. But it's okay, because facial and emotional recognition only really works if you're a white man. Everybody else, you're okay. Now, the other thing that happens is you've got things like, let's check the air quality, CO2 sensors. So a smart campus can do a whole range of different things, tracking people, emotional recognition, facial recognition, CO2 sensors. But at Jisc, one of the things that we're interested in, as well as thinking about all the ethical and all those kind of concerns, is thinking about, hold on, how can we structure the data from these systems so that we can start to put in some kind of analysis, some kind of analytics, link it in with things like the usage of the VLE, library systems, how students are doing on their assessments, to actually start not just doing learning analytics, but also doing institutional analytics, building analytics, and start to think about, could we start to have intelligent timetabling so that actually we get the right rooms at the right times, at the right place, for the right students, with the right cohort, for the right kinds of activities, rather than what happens now is where lecturers have to do the same thing week in, week out in the same room, regardless of what they actually want to do with teaching and learning. So for us, it's very much about thinking, not about the products, it's not about thinking about the different kinds of tools and sensors that are out there, because they're already out there. For us, it's about saying, can we structure the data? Can we use that data to start learning things about our spaces, our buildings, the way that our learners learn, and the way that our teachers and lecturers work? I think that's enough from me. There we go.
Okay, thank you. So good afternoon, everybody. My name's Pearce, and I'm from the University of Glasgow. And the reason I'm here is because I lead our Smart Campus project. And the reason we have a Smart Campus project at Glasgow is because we're in the unprecedented situation where we can expand a city, an urban campus, by 14 acres without having to develop a satellite campus. So within the same location, we can expand our campus by taking ownership of an adjacent hospital that's no longer required. So what that means is that we're able to invest £1 billion over the next decade or so in our campus development. And that £1 billion investment has already kicked off. We've started a 7-year building project, £450 million of new buildings on our site. And for the last 2 years, we've been completely focused on developing the physical infrastructure of our campus. We've got buildings that date back to the 1870s. We've got a whole range of 1960s buildings I'm sure you're all familiar with, and now we're going to have a whole range of new buildings as well. And they're going to be nice and shiny and smart, and they're probably going to be able to do what we already do. So the real challenge now is, how do we make everything smart? So what we want to do is we want to not only be a user of technology, we want to be the innovator of that technology. So we want to integrate technology into our campus to make it smart, and we want to innovate. We want to define what a smart campus is. And my Vice-Chancellor and everybody else in the university frequently asks me, what is a smart campus? And of course, it means different things to different people. James has very nicely just described a view of smart campus, and that's exactly where we are as well. Everybody tells me that we need to put sensors everywhere. Pervasive sensors is the answer. But what they don't tell me is what we're going to sense. and why we're going to sense it. And some of the things you've just heard from James is the sorts of things we want to do. Some people called it closed-loop analytics. It's not only that you're monitoring and capturing data, but you're also then analyzing it, but you're then making decisions, and then you're changing things. So you can then put interventions in place. So our focus is, first of all, we want to get the digital environment right. And what we're doing is we're focusing on next-generation telecommunications. So what we've decided to do is to use our campus as a test bed. And what this is able to do, using our campus as a demonstrator, suddenly then attracts a lot of external organizations in who want to talk to us. So from a university perspective, this has been extremely useful. We're suddenly getting big companies, and I can name the likes of Siemens or Nokia or these types of companies, who actually want to now work with us because they see an opportunity and we got an opportunity. So it's a win-win situation for everybody. So just getting the digital environment correct within a campus is a huge challenge. Some of my colleagues simply want to have wireless that works. That's a challenge enough for them. If you ask our students what they just want endless power sockets. They want to be able to plug that laptop in wherever they are. But that's not very ambitious. Why not have wireless charging everywhere? They want continuous connectivity. So they want high bandwidth, they want low latency. If we want something to happen, you want it to happen immediately. So, for example, 5G telecommunications is one solution from that. We're looking at the energy of our campus, and a lot of places do that. A lot of things that people are not doing is looking at health and well-being. So there's a lot of smart initiatives globally and in the UK, but not many people are actually looking at the health and well-being aspect of a smart campus. So that's one of the aspects we're also very interested in looking at. And of course, what we want to do is have technology that is going to inform our students and help the students in their learning. Okay, so that's a kind of summary of where we are at the University of Glasgow.
Thank you very much. Lastly, Stephen. Very kindly agreed to step in at very short notice as well. Are you on?
It always really annoys the guys at the back when you tap the microphones. I'm sorry. And you can tell I'm the sub because I've got the handheld mic. But I just wanted to tell you about three things really. They're all research projects. They're all pertinent, I think, in a big way. So the first one, and they've all got a website you can go to. The first one, if you go to learnometer.net, you'll see the work we're doing. Funnily enough, Jisc are a partner in the research. We've been looking at it's an Internet of Things, big data, smart campus project. So we're really interested in the physical environment that optimizes learning. We're interested in the temperature, the sound rhythms, the CO2 levels, the pressure, air pressure, the humidity, nine things. Go and have a look. And we built a little box, which we're on the third iteration of now. It's very interesting. And we've been parking them in learning spaces, and you'll see the results of some of that data if you look at the new Fusion building in Bournemouth University. I'm a professor these days. I'm a professor in UCJC in Madrid, Buenos Dias. But I'm also emeritus in Bournemouth, and we certainly put a building together there that was driven by a lot of the information we got back from the Learnometer project. The Fusion building was interesting in several ways, not the least of which being it's a multifaceted building, it's extraordinarily agile, multiple floors, sociable space, daylight pouring through the middle. Most of our colleagues saying nobody will ever want to use that building. It doesn't belong to a faculty, it doesn't belong to anybody. And when it opened, it is our most oversubscribed building in terms of use, by a country mile. So producing buildings that are optimized around the best learning. And to be clear, temperature, 18 to 21, optimal. Light levels, 500 lux or better. I'm building to 1,000 lux. CO2, down to 1,000 ppm parts per million. The data's all there. It's all very well researched, very clear. And building a campus that is around optimal learning, what you get? Optimal learning. And that turns out to be hugely motivating for students and the people who are using it. To keep seeing faces here, I know. Second project, probably more radical, and I'm doing this with Pearson, as Bournemouth University Pearson project. But we thought, what do people actually want from their higher education? And you know what, it turned out to be none of the things we thought. It wasn't the accreditation at all. They wanted to be in a conversation with like-minded people. You know, we've been in a master's degree together, perhaps, and we've really enjoyed the chat. Why would I want to go off and be a sad, lonely person in a cupboard doing a doctorate and have a collapsed marriage and all the other things that go with PhDs, you know? Or I just kind of, let's carry on having a chat at this level, but don't want to finish. And this came out of one of my students, Mark Hampshire, who refused to graduate. He just kept, every time we put another module on, he came back. He said, Mark, you've got the masters. He said, I just like being in the conversation. So if you go to learnology.net, Learnometer was the device, Learnology is the project. I'm not very good at names, they all sound the same, you know. You'll find a remarkable project, and it's remarkable in several ways. Most importantly, it's virtual. Most importantly, beyond that, it's all but free. We're offering it as a subscription degree. You pay, we think, about £14 per month. We did a lot of test marketing. People said if it gets lower, we probably won't value it. It's just like belonging to a gym. You just keep paying that and you turn up. Being a member, you get an entitlement, and the entitlement is to enjoy the things that other people have put on in your learning circle, which, by the way, has to have multiple contexts. Could be FE and HE, could be HE here and HE in Australia, but multiple contexts in your learning circle. If you're in my learning circle, you put on an activity which is seductive and engaging, and we make a judgment as a group whether it was a master's. We really enjoyed that, it was lovely, but wasn't really master's, was it? You don't fail, you just keep on putting on activities until everybody's been happy that the two you've put on per year were of a good enough level. And of course, I have an entitlement to turn up, and I have an obligation to provide. And it works really at that level. And it's really interesting when we started doing the feedback from a huge amount of market research, what people wanted. They wanted real-time notification of comments on their activity. They wanted proper user. They wanted everything, but they didn't need really much university contribution at all. So the marginal cost of rollout, once you hit, say, 1,000 students, is pretty much zero. Because these are self-organizing communities of people who share an ethics base, a research base. They do micro-research, they do substantive research projects. You might accidentally pick up a master's certificate on the way through, but that's not what people were looking for. What they wanted from their smart online virtual campus was notification of the engagement of their community of fellow travellers. So, two interesting things. Face-to-face, let's make the environment better than this, where dark, it's snoozy, it's soporific. You guys are lucky in the light over here. You guys are not getting your £9,000 over there, that's for sure. And then Learnology, and that's not your yawn, that's the room's yawn, you know, so don't need to feel bad. And then the Learnology, which is, you know, what has been the whole thing, and say, what is it that people want that they're not getting at the moment? And I'll leave you with the thought that the design intention of Learnology is to say, what's the percentage participation rate for higher education? This is really quite interesting, because I don't know anybody in my life who couldn't have been successful at university. That some of them are a bit crazy, some of them are pretty scatty, some of them, you know, just didn't work out for them at school. I don't know anybody who intellectually couldn't do it. You just need the circumstances to be right. And I think if we're looking for participation rates of around 90 to 95%, which I think is realistic, then minimal prices, optimized environments, idealized virtual campuses, I believe will deliver on all that. And just by the by, I'm busy writing the National Learning Service document for maybe a future Corbyn government, let's hope. And that really does look at education and learning as a total service. Schools, universities, home learning, company learning, apprenticeships, all in one pot, properly organised, free at the point of need for all. And I think if we're going to deliver on those numbers, we need some radical and smart approaches. Whether Jerem's the right man or not, whole nother conversation. But the National Learning Service, I think, will do all that. Thank you.
So, are we back on? Yeah, we are. So, thank you very much, gentlemen. You have now had 3 sets of projects, ideas, suggestions around what we might mean by the idea of the smart campus, what we might be looking at for some of the trajectory for our universities or colleges. Now, for those of you that are here, 2 minutes, I'd like you to turn to somebody next to you and have a think about this question. It's been a largely positive perspective, I think, so far. What do you like about what you've heard today? I'll give you 2 minutes. I've got a timer here, so I'm going to be quite strict on that. So, quick chat with your neighbour, and if you can feed any of that back through Glisser, I understand that we've had some questions in through already. After 2 minutes, which starts now, we'll then get some panel responses on that as well.
And Santino is saying, blimey, we've only got 20 minutes left. Yeah, absolutely right, but crack on, that's the best we got.
Exactly. So don't be shy. This is a session where you actually get to talk to somebody that you're next to instead of just listen. Okay. We've had a couple of questions come through Glisser, which is good. So I think these are going to come up here on the stage. So Glasgow has a great project, ambitious, thanks, will follow up. I don't think that's a question, that's more a statement. But good to know you got a thumbs up there. Interested to know more about the Glasgow case. And here we go, is a question. Oh, I've got this as a question. We'll take this one to the panel. Which is more important, entertainment or effectiveness?
I'll answer that really quickly. I think good learning is entertaining. I think people innately want to learn. They enjoy learning. Turn on the television, it's full of people learning. Learning to dance, learning to cook, learning to sing, learning to dive, learning everything. And what's happened is entertaining learning has stopped being higher education learning. It needs to be. So
that's a very interesting perspective. What would you guys say to that?
I don't think there's anything written down that says learning has to be uncomfortable, learning has to be horrible, learning has to... I mean, most of us are probably learning now. Most of us have been learning all day. We'll go home, we'll watch a documentary. That's all learning. Reading a book and so on. So, yeah.
Good point. Chris?
I think it's just about the environment that you create. So it's not, we just need to move away from the traditional lecture theatre environment and need to provide the spaces where students actually have to be for quite long periods of a day, and they have to be good environments. And that it talks about seating, it talks about the space, it talks about the connectivity, but it also talks about the people who are talking to them.
That's an excellent point. And I think one of the things that I've always strived to do at City, which is almost harder than the big infrastructure projects where you revamp your lecture theatre, is to then also work with the people that are working in them and to try to encourage changes in the pedagogy as well. Rather than a 2-hour lecture, it's not always the most effective way. Okay, do we have... we don't have any more questions coming through on Glisser, but if anybody wants to show a hand up and we can get a microphone passed around as well. I know there's plenty of conversations going. We've got a hand up here, okay. Thank you, Stephen. If you want to introduce yourself and then briefly and tell us, give us your question.
My name's Aftab. I'm from Bolton College.
Welcome.
Bolton College will be merging with the Bolton University in the next few months.
Okay.
So the question I've got is that most online services aren't smart. If you go to a learner management system, it knows very little about you. So for instance, when you're handing an assignment, it doesn't advise you, are you sure you want to hand this in, because at the present moment in time, you are on a low grade profile Do you want to reconsider that before, and so on. So, for instance, at our college, we've got students on weekends and in evenings asking our chatbot questions about, do I have a lesson tomorrow morning? When's my handy date for an assignment? The chatbot automatically presents future exams to the student and says, don't forget, you've got an exam coming up on Friday, there's a workshop on Wednesday, your work experience is happening next Monday, I notice that you haven't done your prep work for it, how about getting on with it, and so on.
And the students respond well to
that? We've had September was our first induction period where we used the bot, and we've had hundreds of students asking about timetables, what classes they need to be in. I've lost my exam certificate from the summer. Where do I pick up my grades from the August exams and so on?
Is there a question there? Or
yeah,
a
so I was
comment?
wondering, we're using AI and machine learning and learning analytics to make our current services. So we haven't created a new learner management system. We use Moodle at the college, but we've made it behave smarter with the use of AI and machine learning and natural language processing. I'm just wondering, in terms of you guys, how do you see the use of AI to make online services smarter?
Okay, that's brilliant. So a question for you guys, how do we make effective use of AI to improve existing services? Before we get a response to that, we've also got another one here. How can we make public spaces into learning spaces? It's very interesting. So we've got two questions, AI on top of existing services and public spaces into learning spaces. Is there one more question from the audience or comment we can feed in? We've got one over here as well.
Hello. When you're thinking about smart campus, or even if we think about smart cities, one of the problems is that you will collect a lot of data from everyone, and that data needs to be stored somewhere. So you need also that infrastructure. And that infrastructure needs energy, which means natural resources. So are you including in your solutions to the energy, to the power that those infrastructure needs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent question.
If you can explain the solutions, please.
Excellent question. Thank you very much. So we'll take those in the stage as they come, and your question kind of leads on to the next bit of conversation if we have time for it as well. So AI in existing services. Who'd like to have?
So I'll do that fairly quickly. I mean, I'm disappointed. I think that the main way that students come across AI in their undergraduate life is to turn it in, and I think harnessing AI to stop them cheating, and it just seems to me to be ridiculous and embarrassing. And on the other hand, if you think about when you go back 25 years or so, people would assemble in pubs and talk to the cohort the year before and try and work out not just what the course was about, but you look a bit like me, that we'll do the same thing, it suited us. And I think that underlying the intelligence of the crowd, if you like, I think has been sadly neglected in the algorithms of the learning management systems. And I think I helped write the original spec for Future Learn, which was the university's thing, and that had a whole swathe of social intelligence in it, none of which got implemented. And I just think if it doesn't happen, people will take their learning elsewhere. They need those algorithms of mutuality to make it work really. So absolutely, I'm pleased to hear what you're doing, but there's tons more to be done, so it's fine.
Thank you, Stephen.
I just come in on that. I think one of the key things when we start talking about how can we use AI is to ensure that we start from the right place. So we've got all these different tools, we've got all these different systems, and at the top end we've got those interfaces, whether it's a student talking to a chatbot or a student talking to a person who's got a screen in front of them. Is that then underlying structure where it processes the data, it learns from those responses, so we can start to make more accurate responses that actually then get those requirements in, so meeting the students' needs. And I think that kind of simple aspect of I'm a student, where do I go for my next lesson and what do I need, interfaces with so many different kinds of systems. And then when you add the geo aspects of it as well, how can we get them there quickly and efficiently Or how can we get them there so they do their 10,000 steps that day? Or go there, or send them via the coffee shop, which is declining in sales, and you need to get more people going in. Can I take the energy one as well?
Sure.
So, talking about this, yeah. So there isn't an investment in energy in order to make this happen. But at the same time, if you don't do it, there's a lot of wasted energy. So it's about balancing those things out. We have big empty rooms with small cohorts that have been heated and lit, which is wasting energy. If we can have the right number of students in the right size room and for the right amount of time, and not having lights on when there's nobody in there, or heating rooms which don't need to be heated, then the energy costs in having these big data and these data farms can actually be then offset with the energy savings that we'll make on our physical campuses. So that's, I think, is the way of looking at it. How we're going to do that? At the moment, we're still in those very early days here at Jisc about setting what are those data structures. But part of that is the environmental data and the energy costs of that data.
And just a tiny thing on the energy as well, on the virtual energy bit. I mean, if you look at technologies like blockchain, the way blockchain works as a distributed integrity to the thing, and people mine the bitcoins and other cryptocurrencies, but the energy use of those multiple distributions of governance is vast, and Bitcoin currently uses more energy than Nigeria, which is extraordinary, for a virtual currency. So I think we've got to be very careful that in building in intelligence, the cost of that intelligence as we move to more and more powerful computers is not vast in terms of energy. And I don't see a lot of green work in the AI world, and those bits need to join up. It's really urgent.
I agree with that, yeah.
Chris?
No, I was just, I certainly agree with that. We need to join things up. And in terms of our case, I mean, yes, of course, we're increasingly collecting data, but part of our smart campus is to look at the whole energy of to make the campus energy efficient, and even maybe potentially self-sustainable. So looking at the energy is a major issue for us. Maybe not driven specifically by the collection of data, but it's certainly part of the consideration.
And as I suggested earlier on, that this may also be relevant for people with interests in estate management or something like that as well. These are often quite connected. Why doesn't heating or lighting a room have something quite seriously connected to the actual practice or activity that goes on in that as well?
Yeah.
That's the thing we have to be a little careful of. I've been into so many higher education rooms where they turn off every other light to save energy, and of course what they're creating is desperately suboptimal learning conditions. So I'd sooner have smart students that were a little bit energy hungry than...
That's where we need AI.
That's where we need AI. We need to be able to build that balance, and this probably leads us straight on to the public spaces. How do we make public spaces learning spaces? And I'm a professor in Madrid. If I go to Salamanca University, they have this wonderful dome in the middle of the town. It's a parabolic dome. I stand in the middle, I defend my research to the population. The town come in. It's only been there for the last 400 or 500 years. It's been there. And I think we've built a wall in many cases between higher education learning and public learning. I know a lot of institutions in England in particular have been running sort of learning days and learning weeks and so on. But I think encouraging the public to be part of our work is partly about encouraging our work to be part of the public, and spilling out into those buildings, the libraries, the botanic gardens, the railway stations that have been paid for out of public money. Getting learning out into those places seems to be an absolute obligation for higher education, and we've lost that obligation.
Interesting point. So we've got about 3 minutes left in the session today. So the second question, I'm going to assume that there are equally concerns and troubles that you may have as well, but via Twitter at the very least, you're more than welcome to carry on the conversation after this is finished. What I'm going to do is just quickly wrap up with the last things with a couple of points that I've taken away from our work in learning spaces at City. One has been the importance of involving as many people as you can in the process as well. We found that the better learning spaces that we've worked on are ones that people feel a sense of involvement with, with the development, with any of the things that happen there. The other thing to bear in mind as well, as a lot of these guys' points probably be made clear as well, is that these are often an iterative process. I know that you can put a plan together, a master plan together, and we say this is my brand new building, but you have to keep gathering more data, keep doing more research, keep making more consultations. This is not something that has a particular end point. So we're going to be, I'm going to ask for a sentence each, perhaps from each of our panelists to wrap up. The question that's driven me in this particular journey, you can see here. How can the development of a smart campus be shaped? How do we change the direction of travel, the flow of these initiatives, so that they can be truly of the intended benefit to their users, and so that we can genuinely enhance education, research, or estate management? Perhaps I can ask each of you for one sentence each in response to that, and then we'll make it a wrap.
I'm going to quote Jeff Goldblum, which is, just because you can doesn't mean that you should. So it's one of the key things is, just because you can do all these wonderful things with tracking and data doesn't mean necessarily you should. You should think about consent, you should think about the end user, you should think about ethical issues, a whole range of different things. That's more than one sentence, I know.
So I would agree with that, but I also would say that unless you have the digital environment within your campuses, then everything you can dream of is just not going to happen. It's not going to be possible. And that's a huge investment.
So digitize. That's key.
And I'd only really say there's an imperative here of age, really, which is I've had my grandchildren with me today. One's 1, one's 4. You know, they've been rushing all around the show. Their expectations of the support they have for their lives, for their entertainment, for their learning from technology is 100%. And in a world where your phone is smart and your microwave's smart and damn it, your shoes are smart, having a university that isn't smart doesn't sound smart.
Which brings us up very nicely to wrap up the show today. If you could please put your hands together for our guests, James Clay, Chris Pearce, and Stephen Heppell. And I'd like to thank you all very much for your input. I hope that this has been thought-provoking. See you again.